All right. Well, I'm thrilled to be here, like I said. And the story that I'm going to tell you tonight is basically going to be a little bit of my story that is sort of inextricably linked with this LGBT community that I love so much. I grew up in Keller, which was at the time a small town between Fort Worth and Denton. It's sort of suburbia now, but when I grew up, it was a small town with small town ways of thinking that predominated. I was sort of obsessed with being a little overachiever, good little all-American boy, all involved in my church youth group and, all that kind of stuff. Um, when I went to college, I went all the way away to Baylor. And as you might guess, Baylor was basically a continuation of the sort of environment in which I grew up. The same kind of sort of conservative, religious thinking that dominated everything, the same sort of small town mentality, even though there were people there from the big cities. And I sort of went through Baylor being the same kind of guy I was when I grew up. Overachiever, got really into all the things I was a part of, my fraternity and all that stuff that seems so foreign and silly to me now. At the time, it was a big deal. And I managed to go all the way through college and be to the point where I was out of college for a couple of years. And in 1987, and this is a whole other story that I don't get to tell you tonight, but our friends have heard this, but in 1987, in June of that year, I met Ted Kincaid, about a block from where we stand right now. And we went through a couple of years before we got to the point of having a relationship. And in that interim, I got married to a woman. And, in retrospect, it, it seems so crazy after I got past that. But the way I have always sort of explained it once I got to the point of understanding it myself is that I grew up and got all the way to that point in my life without having any awareness that it was even remotely an option for me to be gay and open and, my gosh, have a life with a husband. It was not on my radar screen at all. And that seems kind of bizarre to me because I don't think of myself as that old. But it wasn't that long ago in a way, but that's sort of how it was. And so I met Ted Kincaid, was smitten the night that I met him. A couple of years of craziness ensued. The marriage happened. The marriage was very short, 6 months to be exact. The wedding was fabulous, but nothing else about it was good. And guess who planned the wedding and picked out everything? So when my wife and I split, it was a very traumatic thing. I was sort of devastated because I hurt her so badly. She didn't want that to happen. But it was the most liberating thing for me that had happened up to that point because I sort of simultaneous with divorcing, splitting, telling that news to everybody, said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm gay. And I had sort of, been forced to deal with that because the marriage that was so miserable really forced me to deal with the fact that I was gay and to come to terms with that. And the sidebar part of that was that I had fallen in love with Ted Kincaid, and we became long-distance best friends while he was in graduate school. He moved back here, and we've lived together and been together ever since. Our anniversary is January 1st of 1990, so we've passed 23 years, and yes. And so we're settled, we're in our first couple of years of being together, living in Dallas, happy, young, poor. He's fresh out of grad school. I'm not making much money, not that we do now either, but, and we lived in a little apartment in Oak Lawn, and, just kind of happy, life's good. We're, gay, we're all okay, it's all happy. And we, through some friends who are here tonight, Susan May and Pat Gamble, yes. Ted was working and had become friends with Susan at his job, and she told him about LGPC, the Lesbian Gay Political Coalition. One thing led to another, and a short time after that, I was heavily involved in that organization, which was at the time very active and strong and involved in political work, endorsing candidates, getting gay supportive candidates elected, etc. I got really involved in the gay and lesbian organized effort on the Clinton campaign. starting in 1993, and that sort of gave me the fever to continue that kind of stuff. And to this day, I stay involved in political races often. But I had grown up with well, I grew up being heavily influenced by my maternal grandmother. She was sort of an Auntie Mamish character, and I absolutely adored her. She's the most significant adult in my life besides my mother, in addition to my mother. And she was just a real strong-willed Texas woman, but she also did a lot of volunteer work. And I was smitten by her as I was growing up. I thought she was so glamorous. And one of the things I was really fascinated about was in her little study, she had this wall of plaques and awards and stuff, and it was for all of her volunteer work. And it was sort of in a private place in her house. Nobody really saw it. But I asked her about it one day, and I was a real young kid, and I remember very distinctly having this conversation. I don't know how old I was, maybe only like 8 or so. And I started asking her about those awards, and so she started talking to me about volunteering and why she thought that was important and why she did what she did. And I said something like, well, how much do you get paid for that? And she's like, no, baby, you're not understanding. And so she made me understand how important to her it was. And she said to me, I think you're going to do good things like this someday. When you're grown, you're going to figure out how you're going to volunteer and how you're going to do good things for people. And that really stuck with me. So fast forward, I'm in my earliest stages of involvement in things in the gay community through the political coalition. And I sort of teamed up with my friend Cece Cox, who I had barely met at that time. She was the president of DGLA. And the two of us were the lead organizers, I guess you could say, in an ordinance that we got passed by the Dallas City Council in 1994. And 95. So it sounds so innocuous now, but that ordinance was a non-discrimination ordinance that covered simply city employees. Now, that also was police and fire and all that, so it was a big group of people. It was a big deal. But at the time, it was a battle, and it was the battle we worked on for months, and it was big news, and it was showdown at City Hall, and we had hundreds of people there. The other side had hundreds of people there. They were out, prayer vigiling, saying the sky's going to fall, evil's coming, Satan's taking over Dallas. It was it's laughable now because it was such a simple thing. We're on the cusp of gay marriage, I hope, and I think we are. And so it seems, again, it's one of those things that to me, it seems so amazing that we've made so much change in such a short amount of time, relatively speaking. So we prevailed with that ordinance. We got it passed. And it was all over the news. Cece and I were interviewed in the newspaper and, on TV and stuff. And we had a lot. Cece and I didn't do this alone. We had a lot of help. We had help on the council. Craig McDaniel was the first openly gay city councilman, and he was instrumental in getting us, working with us and getting that ordinance passed. We really built a big coalition of business leaders, religious leaders, and it was a well orchestrated thing. We had the votes lined up. That's what you got to do to pass something at city council. You got to know you have the votes before you're to that point. We did. It passed. It was a big deal, all over the news. We're very, very happy, excited. It's all joy, celebration. Fast forward about 48 hours after that. I'm at home by myself. Ted's gone, and the phone rang. And this was in the days, of course, before caller ID. And on the other end of the line was someone who said, "Is this faggot Steve Atkinson?" And I said, "This is Steve. Who is this?" And this person proceeded to tell me that he was the person that was going to kill me. And I don't really talk about this a lot, and I've never really talked about it in a public venue quite like this, but it's important to my story. So the conversation was very scary. He was pretty graphic, and I won't go into all that. But he told me what he was going to do to me, and at the end of it was going to be I was going to be killed. So, I'm in a panic. I'm alone. I'm thinking, our phone number's listed. Our address is listed in the phone book. What if he's sitting out, what if he's around the corner at the payphone or whatever? So we go into high gear. Our friend Craig McDaniel, we called him as well as calling the police, and they took it seriously. The calls continued for several days, and then they became more spaced out, and by a couple of weeks after that, they had stopped. The police were trying to trace it. They never could because it was always called from a different number and all that. So I had a brief period of time then when I was so scared And I thought, you know, it's not worth it, and maybe I don't need to be doing this stuff, and maybe I don't need to be Mr. Visible in the paper talking about being gay. But that didn't last very long. I basically decided that that wasn't going to be what happened, and in fact, it was what propelled me, I think, to continue. And I just dove in there and went at a fast pace, and I feel really lucky that for the next basically 20 years, I've been able to be heavily involved in this community. I went on and served as the president of DGLA. CC and I and others that worked with us kind of kept on a roll with these ordinances, and in a period of about a year and a half to 2 years, we got the first ordinance passed by the Dallas School District that included any kind of protections for GLBT people. It was an anti-harassment policy that included students, teachers, employees. We got a non-discrimination policy passed for employees of the dartboard. Then we came back, got another one passed at the ISD because they had said that student programming on their student-produced television and news programs and all that, that they couldn't do anything gay-related. And we said, wait a minute, yes you can. Jumped in there, got that done. So we were really on a roll and kept going. So I kind of got the fever to wanted at least to do things maybe beyond Dallas. And I wound up going on the board of what was at the time called LGRL, Lesbian Gay Rights Lobby of Texas. It's since been renamed Equality Texas. And in those years, it was under the very fantastic leadership of Diane Hardy Garcia, one of my heroes and good friends. And I went on that board in 1994 and stayed on it an amazing 9 years. And I was the co-chair of the board for 5 years. And in those years, that the entire time I was on the board, or the first 8 of those years, we worked to get the James Byrd Jr. hate crimes bill passed. And we had to work all of those years to get it passed. Most of the time, we had to focus on fending off scary stuff. Proposed bills that would say GLBT Texans couldn't adopt. That was filed in every legislative session. So those were years of defensive mode where we had to fend off all that stuff. And fortunately, we were able to fend off all that. Gay and lesbian people were not banned from adopting. But we finally got the James Byrd Jr. hate crime bill passed. And that was passed in, I'm so bad about remembering years, that was passed in 2001. And yes. And that was the first time and the only time that a bill has been passed by the Texas legislature that includes any protections for GLBT people. And that was such an amazing battle to see and to get to be a tiny part of. There were so many people that made that happen. But it really, again, drove home to me the importance, which we had seen in the city council battles and the local battles we had. Now I'm seeing it on I was seeing it on the state level, that we really had to, the only way we succeeded with this work was through the coalition building. We were never going to get there on our own, and it was all about building coalitions with community leaders, religious leaders, legislators, and we were able to do that and get that bill passed. I then, kind of decided, well, it'd be nice to do something maybe a little beyond Texas. And fortunately, I had some friends that were, and knew people through the community that were involved with HRC. I wound up getting involved with HRC and getting to serve on that board of governors for 6 years and to co-chair that board the last 2 years I was on it. And I tell you, one of the things, there were so many great things that happened in those years, but it was really in that time when it really was solidified for me that what I truly believe, and some of you have heard me say this before, and I'll always say it, but I really believe that the Dallas GLBT community is the best one, period. And in my role with HRC and being in the national leadership there, you get to see and work with all these other GLBT communities around the country, and there's a lot of great ones. But you also got to kind of see the problems and kind of the infighting, and sometimes the men don't like the women, the more affluent people don't like the less affluent people, the white people and minorities don't get along so well. And I know our community is not perfect. I know we had growing pains way back there that some of you, Candy, Vivian, Louise, so many of you, and so many who are not even with us anymore, worked so hard to get us beyond those growing pains and to get us to the point that we have this community where the men and women do work well together and love each other, and where we all work together and we all know that it's our community. I so I think you could say that in those years of my involvement with HRC, I truly saw that the Dallas way is the way. And we sort of had this joking thing that still goes on, I think, in D.C., where they kind of call the Dallas people cocky because we were always like, well, in Dallas we do this, and like we were always, we had a lot to share because we had a lot of success here and we knew what we were doing. I have slowed down the pace at which I've been doing my volunteer work the last couple of years, but I haven't, as you heard from them saying I was on the board of this organization, I haven't stopped completely, and I don't think I ever really will be able to. The best thing that ever happened to me is Ted Kincaid. Yes. And I owe him a huge debt of gratitude for allowing me to do what I've done in my volunteer work and supporting me as he has done. I never could have done it at the pace at which I did for so many years without his support. And as a sidebar, I want to say I'm so excited that Ted and I joke about our paper trail that we've left. In 1994, the city of Austin opened up a domestic partner registry. That was such a big deal. It didn't really mean anything then for them. They were using it for future city benefits and all that. We went and did that. It was the only thing we could do. In 2001, when the only thing you could do was to do a civil union in Vermont, we did a civil union in Vermont. 2003, when you could get married in Vancouver, in BC, we went to Vancouver and got married. And then finally, and most excitingly, in 2008, we got married in San Francisco. So we have this long paper trail, and by God, we're close to the point of those papers meaning something. So after Ted, I think it's accurate for me to say that the second best thing that's ever happened to me in my life is my tiny little role I've been able to play in this community. Those of you who have done this kind of work in our community know how true it is when I say that the really wonderful side benefit personally that you get, aside from the satisfaction you get from doing work and affecting change and working for the right things, the right causes, the right reasons, the personal benefit is the friendships that you make along the way. And a large number of my very best friends, of Ted's and my very best friends, are friends that we met through this community through my volunteer involvement. And, I think that when I'm old and looking back, I don't think I'll ever stop looking back with I know I'll never stop looking back with fondness and, random things that go through my mind sometimes and just make me smile. Like the tears of joy we had when we passed the first ordinance by the Dallas City Council, like being on the Black Tie Dinner Board, being up on that stage when the committee's up there looking out at the crowd and seeing this huge sea of people that you love, that love you back, and just that feeling that you just can't quite describe it, of how it is when we all come together that time once a year. And then when we give away the money to all of those great organizations, I'm going to always remember fun, silly things like getting called the King of the Gays when I was the Grand Marshal of the Freedom Parade. and I'm always going to remember how hard I had to fight to not cry when I gave my speech after as I received the Kukling Award. Those kinds of things are some of the things that are seared into my mind, stronger than most anything else, and will never, ever, ever leave. And so being involved in this community, as I have been, as I've been so lucky to be able to do, is truly one of the biggest blessings of my life. And I thank you for letting me share that tonight. I thank those of you and those not here who will see this tape sometime who've been a part of that with me. And it's all been wonderful. So take that, Mr. Death Threat.